Good afternoon. I'm Craig Camby. I serve as Associate Dean for Academic Curriculum and Medical Programs in the College of Osteopathic Medicine.
And my name is Thomas Green. I'm the Associate Dean for Clinical Affairs, essentially overseeing the third and fourth year of medical school clinical rotations and also working with students with regards to preparation for residency, for match, and the newest single accreditation system for GME.
My name is Greg Christensen, and I'm the Dean of the College of Osteopathic Medicine for Des Moines University. So we'll take our first question.
We're going off the sheet. So it was advice for preparation for August classes and what should they be doing now? Relax, enjoy now. Sorry, I just had to put that in.
That's probably sound advice. This is going to be your main opportunity to come in energized and ready to participate in a fairly intense academic curriculum. So I would also recommend just coming in eager and enthusiastic to start. The faculty will guide you through each of the courses. And they're very, very good at what they do. So I think you'll appreciate their guidance and their ability to shepherd you and make you successful in the curriculum without any upfront work before you come in to our campus environment.
As a non-academic person, I would probably just add that there's probably two kind of groups of you out there. The one group that's currently finishing their undergrad or some kind of degree in coursework, and then those that perhaps have finished and are working and doing other things. And I would just say that if there's an area or topic that you know of, biochemistry, gross anatomy, physiology, that perhaps was a little challenging for you, that may be something that may not be a bad idea to just review a little bit in leading up to August. Just to kind of fill in a little bit of that, but definitely doing some fun things, relaxing, and enjoying your time.
There will be some requirements prior to matriculation. Those will be communicated to you via email, so you'll want to be timely in fulfilling those obligations before you start. Otherwise, those will be noted, and you'll be advised to complete that once you're on campus. That might be your student health records, immunizations, make sure they're current. Any background checks. We'll also push out an opportunity for you to become acquainted with HIPAA, and so there'll be that module that we'll want you to complete before you actually onboard with us in August.
You guys summed it up perfectly.
Okay. Next question was, are there opportunities to see patients during the first and second year? I'll let Dr. Canby kind of start, and then I'll fill in a little bit.
Okay. The first 2 years are going to be a very intense time for you to kind of acclimate into the academic environment of a medical school program, a professional program. But there are opportunities that Dr. Green oversees for students to shadow. And one of the main things that we look at that point is, are you in good academic standing? Are you doing well in your courses? And so we work together to make sure that you're in a good place to actually take on some additional responsibilities outside of the rigors of the academic curriculum.
And following up on that, and I came to DMU about 2.5 years ago, and I've been a big proponent. By training, I'm an ER physician, and I'm a big proponent of shadowing, and I think that's very important, especially in your first 2 years when you feel like you're being kind of overwhelmed with basic science information and volumes of information, that you have the ability to shadow various specialties and physicians in offices, clinics, and medical centers, and that's a program that we've really gotten off the ground and running. And so a lot of our first year students have already taken advantage of that and have been very excited about it. And I think it serves as a way to kind of help you keep your eye on the prize of, this is what I'll be doing very soon as far as clinical care and working with patients. So I think that part's very exciting, and I'm sure that our new dean, and I know he introduced himself as the comm dean. His first day was last Thursday, so we're very excited to have Dr. Christensen on board. He's a recovering ER doctor as well, so don't hold that against him. But I know he's got some ideas too about getting some early contact and things.
Yeah, and the contact opportunities doesn't end in your first and second year. Even third year and fourth year students still partake in that opportunity. It's a good technique. Students who are still searching for their career goals often find that it's worthwhile now that they've honed in some of their decision making. That it's a good way to develop a relationship with somebody in that specialty, and then to get a second look because as you mature and you gain more exposure, you get to see a different perspective, and it becomes more important to you some of these finite components that you didn't pay attention to. So your development from your first year to your fourth year is going to be extraordinary, and you're going to be as smart as you possibly can. But can be, I think, by the time you've done your second year, and then all of a sudden you have to learn everything all over again, and then you become super smart again in your fourth year, and then when you become an intern, you have to learn everything all over again. So it's an evolving process. You'll be constantly learning, but that's the excitement.
And just to talk some of you off the ledge, because I'm sure if you're already nervous and you heard relearning everything over again, to clarify, Dean speak, as far as everything we've taught you in the first 2 years, you'll now actually be seeing. So instead of looking at a book or a video of heart failure, you're going to see the patient with heart failure and then going home and say, oh, that's why they have this physical finding, or that's why this test is positive. So again, it can be daunting just thinking of the volume of information, but if you've gotten this far, you already have the horsepower and the intelligence to be successful. It's just us giving you the rest of those tools. Please explain the DMU grading system. And there's actually two, one preclinical and one clinical, so I'll defer again to Dr. Canby.
For the first 2 years, the majority of the courses are going to be graded on a letter grade basis, A+, A minus. We have the same grading tiers within the B range. Then the C range is a little narrower in that you have a C+ and a C. Anything below a C level performance would be classified as a failing mark. 70% is typically going to be the minimum passing mark in your coursework to achieve a C. However, course directors do have at their discretion to raise the bar. So occasionally you'll see some courses at 80% and above. Some of those are associated with the standard letter grading scale I just mentioned. Other courses that maybe raise the bar might have a pass-fail grading system in place. Although the A+ will look a little better on a transcript, it does not carry any greater weight in quality points. It's still equal in value to an A. So that would be 4 quality points for an A+ or an A.
As far as clinical grading, this has undergone some revision, in part due to me, for the fact that when I got here in 2014, essentially there was pass and fail for your clinical rotations. And following the transition from undergraduate to graduate medical education and how much emphasis we put on prepping you for getting that residency that you want, and looking at, there's surveys done each year of residency program directors to say, what are the things that you value the most in deciding who you're going to interview and how you're going to rank students on your rank list for match. And so one of those characteristics for actually getting an interview was achieving honors in your desired specialty. So as of this past year, I was able to include an honor system, which we'd had in the core rotations, which are the typical third year family medicine, internal medicine, pediatric surgery, psychiatry, OBGYN. We've now required emergency medicine either in the third or fourth year. But what I was able to get past also was a high pass. So that, and there's two metrics for that. There's a standardized exam in the core rotations that students take at the end of their rotation. And then there's also the evaluation that the preceptor completes. So you have to hit metrics on both sides to achieve honors. But let's say, maybe the preceptor, you didn't quite hit those metrics on the evaluation, but you just did wonderful on the end of rotation exam. Under the new system, you would earn the designation of high pass, and that denotes you as having a higher level of competency and expertise in that rotation. And I'm also looking at working to try and get some additional high pass or honors for other rotations that we don't always have exams for, radiology, anesthesia, because it's just as important for those students to have the ability to get a high pass or honors. So that's kind of the clinical grading rubric.
And my 2 cents on that is that the grades are helpful. They help to, spatially separate folks, but that's not how you get a residency. Residency is developing relationships, and that's one of the things that we're working very hard at DMU to develop, because you as a person are really auditioning for a job, and your job is not going to be provided to you by your grades. It's going to be provided to you by your performance, and that performance is going to really highlight, that third and fourth year. So that whole preparation begins the first day you start school, because that's when you start your relationships. It starts with the relationships with your professors, and then you begin to find out that your influence is quite great, and you expand that into the clinical realm, and then the influence becomes even more pronounced as you seek nationally for those residency positions. And I guess we can all talk, as we're emergency physicians at this particular space, but it's a small world, and the emergency physicians know each other, and we know the folks that are going to perform well, because we want to get those people into our companies. So that's the mindset you might want to consider when you're moving through school, that it's out of college and it's really an apprenticeship. That's where you're moving to.
And I suppose one of the elephants in the room is board scores in residency. And so, I have a lot of colleagues, as does Dr. Christensen, that are program directors. And, you will see that there are a lot of programs that initially put an emphasis on level 1 of the boards. And I think if you ask most program directors and most physicians, I think we'll all tell you the same thing, which is no way does board score reflect the kind of physician that you're going to be. Having said that, if I have 10 slots and I have 2,000 applicants, I have to have some means to be able to thin slice and get to a core group that I'm going to evaluate, and that's where board scores do come in. When you look at the program director survey, the #1 factor for determining who's going to get an interview is board scores. So as you're going through and evaluating, and we're very proud of our first-time pass rate on level 1 and level 2 exams, not only for COMLEX, but USMLE. And so we're very proud of that, just as we're proud of our 100% match rate for the match. So those are metrics that are very important, that we make a commitment to you that we're going to give you every tool to excel on your boards and subsequently get the residency that you desire.
And that interview process is just the beginning. So that's just the first hurdle. And again, it's going back to that relationship and being able to communicate well and connect with your preceptors so that you can get that spot.
Does DMU have lecture capture technology? Dr. Canby, you're all over this.
Great question. We currently use a system called Camtasia, but starting in January, the university will launch Panopto. They're a major player in lecture capture technology, and they have a very efficient system that allows us to automate lecture capture across the various lecture halls where our students will attend, and so that it does have a prominent place in our curriculum, and students do enjoy having the opportunity to review lectures or to zero in on a segment of material that maybe they didn't quite grasp when they were there. And certainly life does happen, and that there are situations where students may not be able to make it to the curricular event, and they can be able to access the material even though something happened that prevented them from being there.
Is class attendance mandatory, and could you describe a typical day or week?
A typical day or week might vary a little bit depending on how you're grouped, but we know that in year 1 as well as in year 2, our students are scheduled on average for 20 hours of instruction. That might be in a lecture setting, that might be in a small group environment, that might be in the OMM lab, that might be in the gross anatomy lab, that might be in clinical reasoning where you're doing standardized patient encounters or simulation cases. So about half of a work week, if you will, is set aside for you to receive your instructional activities, and then the remainder of the time that you have available is for you to review that material, to digest that material, to make relationships between the information, to connect what's going on in one course with something that's going on in another course, and your ability to do that really will help reinforce and activate your understanding of the information.
Mandatory attendance.
Mandatory attendance. In many cases, lectures are not mandatory, but many lab events are going to be mandatory. Gross anatomy lab, OMM lab, OMM lectures are mandatory. Bioethics events are mandatory, but by and large, many of the lectures are not, so it's up to students' discretion whether or not they want to be physically in a lecture hall having that face-to-face in connection with their faculty member.
So, Dr. Campy, how do students keep up, and what resources are available and are there tutors?
Students are marvelous at being able to keep up with the material. The mantra is, it's not the difficulty of the material, it's the volume of the material. It's like taking a drink out of a fire hydrant. But students, I think, very, very quickly, in most cases, sometimes there's a learning curve, but most students are able to adapt very, very quickly with the intensity of the environment, and they learn how to study smarter, not harder. There are various techniques that can be used to allow students to study smarter. For students that need some assistance, we have the Center for Teaching and Learning on campus. It's a university-wide office, and we have educational specialists that will sit down with students and talk about study strategies, test-taking strategies, if maybe that's an issue. And then we have student tutors that are available if someone needs some assistance with their understanding of biochemistry, gross anatomy, or the other subjects that you'll find in our medical school curriculum. So we do provide those resources, and we encourage our students to avail themselves of those resources if necessary.
That's a great question, because I think one of the things that a lot of students sort of think about is that they've been successful as independent students for so long, and then they come to medical school and they have huge volumes, and they find out, wow, that's the real diamond in the rough for a school, is to have those relationships with a really great student body, because then you find out you can't do everything on your own. And medicine is not practiced on your own. It's a team-based system. And that's when you learn that your fellow classmates can really help you out. And learning in teams is a much, much more effective, much better process, and the students enjoy that part, and that's something that they learn. So it's a transformation where you become, go from that independent process into a team-based process. So things will change, and that's part of the fun.
I will also tell you that we have very much an open door policy that, and I've worked at some other comms in the past, and I've never seen such an open door policy, whether it's the professor or the chair of the department or the course director working with students. And traditionally, some of the really challenging courses, biochemistry, anatomy, pharm, phys, but every course director and faculty sets aside time to meet with the students, because sometimes there's just concepts you need to really sit down with the content expert. And that's something we're also proud of, that our Center for Teaching and Learning understands that they're there to help with kind of the mechanism and process of learning and processing. But when it comes to the actual content, you go to the content expert. So if it's cell and tissue, you're talking to Dr. Canby. So depending on what's going on, you have those different avenues, but there's very much an open door policy for both faculty and administration, and I think that helps to make students feel better. We did a survey a year or two ago. It was very interesting, and we said to the students coming in orientation, if you had academic difficulty, how likely are you to ask for help? And there was a high percentage that said not very likely. And part of that is the fact that you all are so high achieving, so driven, so smart, and you've accomplished so much on your own that it's very difficult to all of a sudden say, I'm struggling. For a lot of you, getting a C is like, finding a four-leaf clover. You've never had one before. And so these are some of the stresses, and I'm very proud of the fact that in the news there's a lot about wellness, resiliency, depression, suicide. We've been very proactive to really help the students to not feel overwhelmed and have those mechanisms. And I think when it comes down to it, and you're in the thick of the semester, having those supports is huge.
I'd like to emphasize the fact that faculty are certainly important resources on campus, not only in the formal lecture environment or the lab environment, the instructional environment, but certainly outside. If you want to make a faculty member's day, you want to brighten it, just show up at their office with a set of questions and sit down with them and see them light up and shine. That really does brighten their day and kind of underscores why they're here and why they enjoy being here on a campus that prides itself on its educational mission and its ability to achieve it.
The next area is boards, USMLE COMLEX, and I'll give a little overview and then pass the baton. But you know, the board exams, the COMLEX USA exam, the USMLE, are actually state medical licensing examinations. And COCA, which is the accrediting body for DO schools, has stated that students must pass level 1 and level 2 of those exams. And so they function to help you to eventually have a license to practice. However, it also gauges a minimal level of competency. With the single accreditation pathway for GME, we've seen a rise to where this past year we've had about 65% of the second years take the USMLE voluntarily. Some schools require it, we do not. We do require the COMLEX because that's part of our accreditation. But again, when students are looking at being more competitive for residencies, more and more of them take both exams just because they want to have every option and opportunity available to them.
And I'll tell you that process is going to change because the two tests have a lot of correlation, and the COMLEX is an excellent test, and that's the one that the osteopathic process moving forward will be focusing on. But they're both excellent tests, and they will help you understand where you fit in the realm of your education.
To provide you some details, the first level of COMLEX is taken at the end of year 2. Our students do very, very well on this first level. This focuses on the basic science areas as well as osteopathic practice and principles and behavioral science. And when we look at our pass rates here over the last 3 years, for example, the class of 2016 had a 98% pass rate versus a national average of 94. The class of 2017 had the same 98% pass rate versus a lower national average of 92%. And still in progress, we just have a few test takers within our class of 2018 cohort, and certainly a larger number at the national level, but right now we stand at a 96% pass rate versus a 93% pass rate. And if you look earlier to this 3-year reporting period, our numbers are equally outstanding and above the national averages. Our mean scores on the exam are above the national averages. And when you drill down and look at the disciplines that are covered on COMLEX level 1, those particular subjects of anatomy, biochem, pharmacology, physiology, OPP, etc., we're above the national mean in all the disciplines that get reported out. There's always a little bit of a disclaimer because we don't have any great assurance as to the depth and breadth of coverage, and a lot of the questions now in the exam are integrated, so it's hard to tease out anatomy from physiology, perhaps from biochemistry. But nonetheless, when you trend that out and you see that we're consistently from 1 year to the next year to the next year above the national average, we're in a great place. And we do deploy the priority of resources that are necessary for our students to be successful. And number one is our curriculum, our formal curriculum, but we also provide some additional resources for student success on the boards. That was COMLEX. Of course, all of our students are required to do that and pass all the levels in order to graduate accreditation standards. But as Dr. Green said, more and more of our students are taking step 1 in addition to COMLEX level 1. Step 1 would be the United States Medical Licensing exam. And if we look at the last 3 class years, class of 2016, we had 91 students sit for it. In 2017, the graduating class year bumped up to 130. And then with the class of 2018, even bumped up more, 141. So we're seeing this incremental change over time, and we'll probably see further increases with the class of 2019 and perhaps even with the 2020 group. If we look at pass rate, again, this is a self-selected, there's sample bias here, but if you look at the pass rate of our students, they were very competitive nationally, and this national comparison would be all the MD students and all the DO students that are taking the exam. So if the class of 2018, the test cycle is still open, so it's not a final number or tally, but we came in at 97% pass rate. 96 was the national, so above. Class of 2017, 98% were successful in the first administration versus a national pass rate of 95. And in the class of 2016, 99% were successful in the first administration versus a national pass rate of 96. And if we take a look at the mean score on step one, we're usually within 1 or 2 points from the national mean, and we're in the neighborhood of 227. National mean usually is around 229. If we kind of lift up maybe some outstanding students, here recently we had a student score in step one at a 270 plus, 300 is a perfect score. Think back on COMLEX level 1 in the 2018 cohort, we had a student score at 851 and a 999, 999 is a perfect score. So we are very successful when we look at the metrics as they relate to national board performance with that first level.
So I know that's a lot of information, but basically what that boils down to is that the curriculum's been validated. And as we move to that single accreditation system, there'll be just one exam that you'll take. There won't be a need for multiple examinations. It'll be following a single process. Because the correlation, there's multiple studies that have come out at this point showing that correlation. And as you mentioned, the 270 and an 850, they correlate. So those folks that are high performers perform well on all exams. So I would expect that trend to continue as we now go to a single system.
And for level 2, which consists of 2 components, you have the CE, which is the cognitive exam, which is essentially the written examination, and then you have the physical examination, or the PE, which is correlated to the CS, or clinical skills, for the USMLE. Over the past 3 years, our first-time pass rate has ranged from both exams from 97.3 to 98.6%, and we've maintained consistency at that. So we're very proud of those numbers. All of our discipline scores, pediatric emergency medicine, all of the scores, we are above the national average. So we're very proud of that, and that attests to our preparation and also our clinical education as well. We also have what's called a clinical comprehensive assessment week, and we bring all of our students back again the third year. We put them through a week of standardized patient labs, simulation. We have all students do a ComSay, which is a practice COMLEX, and we instituted a minimal passing score. And what we have found is that we saved some people from potentially failing or doing poorly on the COMLEX. And because it's such a high stakes exam, the return on that investment has been phenomenal. And we also incorporate that for level 2. So we've been very proud of the preparation and our students' performance on that. We take credit to some degree that obviously you guys are bringing the horsepower and the intelligence and the drive, but we're there to facilitate and help you be successful.
And the other component is the osteopathic principles, and the COMLEX test is focused on that part of the curriculum, and we can say that our folks have done an excellent job in preparing you, and that's part of our osteopathic distinctiveness, and so I can validate that as well.
Rotation years. There's a whole bunch of questions on rotation years. So let me settle in here as the clinical affairs person. Please describe the lottery system and how it works. So apparently some people have some inside information. The lottery system really talks to how second-year students getting ready for third year will determine where they're going to do their core rotations for third year. To give a brief kind of overview, third year is essentially your foundational core rotations, and I talked about family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, OBGYN, psychiatry, surgery, and then we have some subspecialty time as well as selective time, and then emergency medicine you can take in your third or fourth year. Fourth year is really, we have a few requirements as far as inpatient medicine, community, international medicine. We have a very robust international offerings where you can go to one of 11 countries to do up to 8 weeks of international rotations, great exposure, as well as community and rural medicine. And then you have anywhere between 28 and 32 weeks of elective time, which is probably some of the most out of any of the comms. And that's very important in this era of competition, so that not only are you giving a program a chance to see you, but you get to see them as well. And I have to remind students of that a lot, that it's not just you that's auditioning, it's the program and the facility. And you have to get there and say, am I comfortable? Do I feel like I fit for the next 3, 4, 5 years to be here to train? As far as how that system works, in third year, we essentially have two types of placements. We have what's called year-long sites, and we have non-year-long track. Year-long sites are essentially relationships that we have both in Iowa and in 6 other states, where for the entire third year you would work through that health system or that care facility. And so, for instance, we have Wisconsin, the Aurora system. We have a lot of areas in Ohio. Obviously, we have multiple 12, 13 here in Iowa. We have Texas. We have Minnesota. And so if you kind of match that year-long site, you would be able to get an apartment for the year and spend your year kind of doing all of your third-year rotations through there. Not to go into too much detail, but as far as part of our process is we realize that life happens. And so we have some students that have personal or a family member that is maybe under care in a certain area, or they have, a family member or some extenuating circumstance. And so we have what's called an exemption process, where students can provide documentation saying, I really need to be in this geographical area in my third year because of X. We also have the ability to write a personal statement. Every student gets to write one personal statement to their top site to say, this is why you should choose me. I'm from Mason City, Iowa, and this is why I want to come back to Mason City to practice and to do my third year at Mason City. So that's kind of the year-long. And then we have the non-year-long, which essentially a lot of people choose because you have the ability to set up rotations on your own. So we have a lot of people that say, I'm from California, I'm from New Mexico, I'm from, North Dakota. I'd like to go back there and do some rotations during my third year. And we have a mechanism where we can work with different facilities and physicians so that you can go back and maybe do 1 or 2 rotations. We have students that do their entire third year back at home. So it just really depends on which facilities, do they already have existing agreements and relationships, but every year we get new facilities in new states because we have students that are making those connections. So that's kind of the lottery system. That is kind of the non-year-long. And if you don't get a site by exemption or personal statement, then you rank your top 8 or 10 sites, and there's all information sheets about them. And typically about 86% of the students get one of their top 3 choices, so it's worked very well in the past. Next question, length of a rotation, if not at a year-long site. Pretty much most of our rotations are 4 weeks in length. We do have some 2-week rotations or abilities for some selectives to do 2 weeks, but most of them are all 4 weeks. We do require a total of 8 weeks of family medicine in third year, but that can be 4 weeks with one provider, 4 weeks with another provider. But the typical length is 4 weeks. Some of them can be 2, and especially when you get into your 4th year, people sometimes do 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 3 weeks, so there is that flexibility to do that. Speak to the quantity of rural sites versus urban sites. I'm very proud of the fact that amongst our sites we have an entire mix of rural, suburban, and urban sites, and so there's pros and cons to all of them. Kind of too much to get into now, but sometimes when you're going out to a smaller location and you're doing surgery, guess what? You're first assist with that attending surgeon, and you're scrubbing in on every surgery to assist. Now, you may not see all the pathology of a big urban center, but for some of our students that are at those big urban centers, they may be 10th in line to try and scrub in because they have auditioning students. So one of the things we pride ourselves on with a lot of our sites, especially in Iowa, is you get one-on-one time with the attending. You're not necessarily always with a resident. So that's one of the nice features we have. We have a lot of rural locations as well. If I'm interested in rotation in a certain area with no DMU sites, is it possible? Yep, and I think I alluded to that. So every year we have students that are coming from different areas that Some of them will be able to facilitate 1 or 2 rotations. Some will facilitate up to the entire 3rd year. So you definitely have that ability to do that. The constraints typically are some big facilities or hospitals say, you know what, we already have agreements with 3 medical schools, we can't sign any more, and without an affiliation agreement, you can't rotate there because that protects you and it protects the facility. But that's, you know, something that we can talk more about, but there is that ability. You talk about integrity and maintenance of current sites. You know, we use a rotation management system called eValue, which is a system where you log your patients' procedures, evaluations are done, scheduling is all done through there. You can do it on your phone, on your computer, on your tablet. One of the nice things about that is eValue has a tremendous amount of data. And in the last year, we've had a lot of work by our own IT and eValue to be able to pull data out of there. So I'm constantly reviewing sites and preceptors, and essentially I would rather be shorter on sites or preceptors than to have a low quality site or preceptor. So our task and our first priority is that you have a great experience. So we're always constantly evaluating. We go and do site visits. We talk to the students. We get that constant feedback, and we go and meet the preceptors and tell us about a typical day with the students. So priority or quality and assessment of our clinical training is a major priority. And just for regulatory purposes, COCA, our accrediting body, also requires that we assess these constantly, the preceptors, the sites. But we are kind of like Frank Perdue with the chicken person. We go even a higher standard because really we feel it's our duty to you to provide the best quality.
I think he just referenced his age.
I did. You're all saying Frank Perdue. How do 4th-year elective rotations work? Essentially, without going into too much detail, they work in 2 fashions. There's something called VSAS, which is the Visiting Student Application Service. It is a electronic automated service that's web-based that the AAMC, the American Association of Medical Colleges, came up with several years ago as a way to kind of set up and have a process for audition and elective 4th-year rotations. More and more hospitals are joining VSAS, and what happens is we just gave tokens to all of our current 3rd years so they can start logging in to put information in. In the spring, around April or May, they can start going through and say, okay, for June, my top choice is Boston Children's, my second choice is CHOP, my 3rd choice is Rainbow Babies to do pulmonary medicine. And then within about 3 to 4 weeks, they will either be accepted or rejected as far as for that rotation. And so that's one way to set up your 4th-year electives. The second way is for the non-VSAS, is kind of calling and saying to Hospital X, maybe a smaller hospital, I'm really interested in doing a month of emergency medicine or OBGYN in August of next year. How soon can I sign up for that? You're all going to be assigned a clinical coordinator within clinical affairs. They will be your single point of contact. They will be your advocate, and they will be really your key person, whether it's trying to schedule, if an emergency comes up, whatever it might be. They're, in a sense, kind of your concierge to work with you and help you be successful in your scheduling and going through 3rd and 4th year. And as importantly, you're so busy with learning and rotations, and then when you get to 3rd or 4th year, you're focused on residency and the residency applications and match. So they're the ones keeping up saying, hey, make sure you do your required community medicine. You have 4 more months, let's get that scheduled. So they help kind of keep you on task with that as well. Do students schedule themselves? If so, how much does DMU help? 3rd year is essentially scheduled. If you're at a year-long site, the year-long site determines the schedule as far as the orders and things because they know the preceptors. If you're non-year-long and want to kind of set up your own, you have the ability to self-schedule. So you might say, you know what, OBGYN, surgery, and emergency medicine, I'm going to set up on my own. And then we'll fill in all of the rest for your 3rd year if you're non-year-long. So there's definitely a lot of say. There is some work if you want to set up on your own, but we're always willing to help with the paperwork and so forth. If you go through what's called the optimization, all of that will be kind of set up for you, and you'll be able to submit preferences on where you might want to do some of these rotations. Is it possible you could be in one city for most of the 4th year? Absolutely. One of the reasons that a lot of hospitals take students is ultimately they're a little selfish. They'd love you to come there and do your residency and ultimately maybe practice there. And so, right now sometimes recruiting is a big deal for these hospitals. So if you come there for a year long and do really well, they might say, hey, do you want to stay for your 4th year? And this is a chance for them to get to know you and you get to know them. So yes, there is that opportunity at some of our sites to stay there through the 4th year as well. And can you discuss housing during rotation years? So really, 3rd year, if you are at a year long, it gives you that opportunity to get a lease of an apartment for a year, which makes things a lot more manageable. If, let's say, and some people come to Des Moines, they buy a house, and now all of a sudden maybe they match to Minnesota. Those are things you got to think about that we try and talk to people about. Maybe you may not want to buy a house, or if you have a family, they may stay, and if you do some out rotations, 1 month here, 1 month there, they can keep the house, and then we would work to try and find some housing. But one of the changes since when Dr. Christensen and I were students back in that day, housing was pretty much provided across the board, and I would say nowadays, it's really not. And so we try and work to find those options and abilities. Some of our sites have discounted housing, so that's something we will certainly cover in more depth. That was a mouthful. So always have questions. At orientation, we see at orientation, Camby goes first, I go second. I always feel kind of like bad because he's got to go through all the 1st and 2nd year and the exams and the credit hours. And I come up and I'm like, hey, rotations. People are like, yes. I'm like, sorry, Craig. So kind of used to that.
That's right.
Residency match process. Well, I think we've talked a little bit, and I can probably summarize this. How are DMU students doing? DMU students are doing very well. Like I said, the last 3 years, about 100% match. Typically, when you look at our students, and because you have the option to enter the AOA or the DO match, and you have the option to enter the NRMP or the MD match, and obviously in 2020, possibly 2019, it'll be just one match. But in the interim, on average, about 60 to 65% of our students match through the NRMP or the MD match. I will tell you that we match every specialty. This past year, our 2016s, we had 2 match neurosurgery, orthopedic surgery, ER. We have people match in, obviously, primary care. It was actually down a little bit in 2016. We had about 50% match primary care. 2015, it was 62%. But we also have a lot of students that get in first-time matches. So we had somebody match in general surgery at Gunderson Lutheran, which is a huge facility up in Wisconsin. 2 years ago, we had a student match general surgery at Geisinger in Pennsylvania. So one of the nice things about being a DMU student is that we have a great reputation because of you students and how well you've done in our curriculum. But I think that goes a long way. So if you're sitting back and you're one of those people that say, I was born to be a dermatologist, we can work with you. If you're sitting there saying, I have no idea what I want to do, and that's most people, even in their 3rd and 4th year, we'll work with you as well. But if you're sitting back saying, well, I think I want to be orthopedics, we place tons of orthopedic surgeons. We have 12,000 alumni throughout the country, so we have a huge alumni base that we're starting to really resource for our students. So I think we've done very well. We have a very engaging process, careers in medicine, where we start engaging early with your faculty advisor about what specialty you might want to go into. We have a lot of clinical faculty and administration that are happy to meet with students, and we start working with them early on to say, based upon some of your metrics, your Part 1 boards were a little bit low, you want to do this competitive specialty. And what I tell students is, I'm never going to tell you, you can't do X. I will never tell you that. Now, if you have a very low board score and you want to do a very competitive specialty, what I'll tell you is, here's a strategy to approach that, but we're going to have a plan B and C, so in case you don't achieve that. And so let's just say quickly as an example, you want to be an orthopedic surgeon, and you got a 410 on your COMLEX, which is really not very competitive for that specialty. You may not get many interviews or even match into that. So an option may be, do you do a transitional year, which is already in flux right now anyway, because a lot of those spots are going away, or some of our students choose to say, you know what, I'm going to do family medicine and I'm going to do a sports medicine fellowship. I can be a team physician. I can do lots of things with that. So there's lots of options and lots of different ways to go on that, but we have a lot of counseling. We work with students as they're approaching match, giving them pointers, doing a lot of mock interviews and things of that nature. And then they asked about matching allopathic, osteopathic, and I touched on that. The last thing that I would just mention to you about the match and about the residency process is that, again, specialty care, primary care, we've done a very good job of. And I think, when it comes down to the preparation work, and where the students end up going, we have an excellent resume, and you can find that on our website as well as all the various programs that our students have matched into. And we've even had a few students as third years sign on contracts. We had the 2015 gal who went to Geisinger, and we had a hospital in Iowa sign her to a 5-year contract as an attending surgeon once she's done with training. So again, I take a lot of praise for that for our students and for our program. Dual degree options, and do they add time? How many additional classes, and are they online, are they physical, and what are those options?
We offer formally on campus several dual degree options. We have 2 within the College of Osteopathic Medicine. We have a Master of Science in Anatomy. We also have a Master of Science in Biomedical Sciences. That particular program is a thesis-based program. And then outside of the college, in the College of Health Sciences, we have a Master of Public Health program and a Master of Healthcare Administration program. The MSA program was developed and designed so that students could complete it before they launch into clinical rotations. And we typically have 1 or 2 clinical students in a DO program that will avail themselves of that particular option. Dr. Green mentioned our graduate who had a 5-year contract to become a surgical attending. She also completed her MSA program with us. Students do in that program receive credit for prior coursework, so it does reduce the overall credit hour load that they would have to complete once accepted into the program. So a student for MSA would be looking at about 24 additional credit hours of coursework. The Biomedical Sciences program is going to extend your year. You typically would take some courses as a 2nd-year student, and then during a year interval that would extend at the end of year 2 prior to the beginning of year 3, the student would focus on their thesis-based research. The MPH and the MHA programs can both be completed within the 4-year program of study in the DO program. Almost all of those classes are offered online. They do have some formal face-to-face curricular events, but those are readily managed too, in spite of the curricular load that a DO student would have within the program.
And just to add on, there's also, you had talked about the MPH and MHA, which also opens additional doors. One of the things we find is that more and more physicians, thankfully, are getting into management, getting into administration, getting into education, and so that's a great way to get those additional educational experiences and credentials that really are required today. This next question is a really tough one, an update on the dean search. Dr. Christensen, he's our update. You have some questions under that, so I will turn the floor over to Dr. Christensen.
Oh, you have that on the backside? So there's a lot of new things coming down the pike, and I have to really step back for a second and just say DMU has some fantastic folks here, and that's one of the reasons that I was so attracted to coming to DMU. And these 2 guys are perfect examples. Dr. Green is just outstanding, does a wonderful job, as he's already alluded to, that he's put all this information together, but behind all that experience comes the ability to really give you the opportunity to be the best doctor that you want to be. And it's going to be incumbent upon you to take advantage of that, and that's what he helps to do, is provide that professional maturity. But where that starts is with folks like Dr. Canby, who does a great job in making that transition so that you can start that professional life. Because we're not going to develop a doctor for today. You folks are going to be doctors of the future. And what happens today is going to be very, very different than the healthcare system that we're going to see 10 years from now, which is the beginning of your practice life. So that's our goal, is to give you the tools so that you can have the critical thinking skills, the lifelong learning skills, and be able to take that no matter where you go. And having practiced both in the university setting and in the rural setting, I can tell you the rural setting is very, very challenging. So we have to be good in order for you to be good, because when you're out there making those decisions independently, those patients totally depend on your skills. And if you can't provide those skills, then the patient is the one that suffers. So nobody wants to be in that position. They want to make sure that they can provide the best that they can do. And like I said, being a new dean is fantastic because I have great people here, and these guys are perfect examples of what DMU can provide for you. So I hope I answered that question.
Well, I'll play Walter Cronkite. I'm dating myself again.
Yeah.
I'll play the commentator in that if I'm a student who has kind of signed on, I make a lot of analogies to sports. So I've committed to DMU, and now the head coach is new. And so I may be sitting back going, you know, on paper, Dr. Christensen looks like the best thing since sliced bread. But what I really want to know is he going to go from what DMU is now to PBL, everyone's PBL, problem-based learning, or is it all online? And that's some of the questions we get. So I would defer to Dr. Christian and say, you know, if I'm going to be part of the 2021 class, and I've come to learn and love a lot of things I love about DMU, can I hold on to those things that I love about DMU curriculum and things that I've learned about?
Yeah, so the DMU process is going to maintain its excellence. But again, as Dr. Green alluded to, when you have more credentials, those folks that are getting those credentials, and I'll give you an example, you know, being a physician is great, but now we've learned that physicians aren't always the best teachers, and many physicians now are getting educational degrees. I happen to recognize that issue, and I went and got a master's degree in education for that purpose. I focused on simulation and andragogic learning. So we're not, you know, pedagogic learning is sort of the buzzword that was used when you're in grade school. You're not in grade school anymore. You need to find out exactly what you need to learn. And that's a different responsibility. And from an educator's perspective, we cater to that. So we're going to focus and provide you a much higher professional product. And that's being provided because we have excellent, well-trained instructors to help with that process. And it's all the way through the didactic period. So again, we're going to be teaching for the future. And things will change. Medicine changes. If you stick to something today and you're in medicine, then you're already obsolete. So as far as education is concerned, if we can't adapt to the new environments that are occurring, then we're going to be taken over as well. It's sort of the going theory. And you know, Zika virus came out of nowhere, and guess what? We're having to challenge ourselves with Zika virus. Well, SARS virus was the other issue that we had to follow, and we adapted to that. So we will continually grow, and that's part of that life learning process that we're instilling in ourselves, and we're going to offer that to you as well.
So we'll cover the nuts and bolts.
Oh,
You're
I
going
have
to
to
change
time
dress
out.
code.
Time
You're
out,
going to
time
change attendance
You got to
policy.
use Walter Cronkite. I'll use Paul Harvey. And now for the rest of the story.
Excellent. Excellent. Well played.
Go ahead.
Attendance policy, you're going to change that dress code. These are some of the specifics that were asked ahead of time. Or do you have any mind of changing for any of those type things? Curriculum per se, the current format?
And the curriculum is always going to adapt, so I'll focus on that issue because that's the most important. The curriculum, like I said, has been validated. We're able to perform well on the examinations, but we'll also be providing those learning techniques that help students perform best. And like I said, I had that experience with high technology pieces such as simulation, ultrasound. Those are things that we'll incorporate a little more strongly into the system, and so those things will adapt. In order to learn that way, you have to participate. So I can't see how you could learn about these neat things without being there. So, and for me, as a patient who's going to be a patient probably sooner than later, as we reach these ages, I want to make sure my doctor knows what they're doing. I want to make sure that doctors had that experiential learning, that transformative learning, and can perform competently. In order to do that, you have to learn, and that means you have to be participating. Otherwise, you can read things in a book and probably never be able to be a good doctor. Our job is to help you to develop professionally, and that's more than just learning what a word is or saying how it's a big word like staphylococcus. You're going to get past that. What we're trying to do is help you to be an excellent professional, and that takes time and that takes relationships. So we're going to be focusing on those areas.
And vision that you may have for the future of DMU. I know you kind of covered that, but
well, DMU continues to expand, continues to grow. Again, we're going to continue to provide that service for our education mission. That's what we're focused on, and we'll continue to move forward in the healthcare space.
what makes DMU unique in regards to student success and outcomes, and I'll kind of start by saying that one of the things that attracted me to DMU when I interviewed 3 years ago was their desire to continually reinvent and innovate themselves. I don't like the buzzword out of the box because I think that's overused. But we made the decision a few years ago to get ultrasound technology. And we're now one of about 7 medical schools on the DO side and about 40 between DO and MD that actually have started to integrate and utilize ultrasound within the first 2 years of the curriculum. So by the time we have our DO 18s and 19s hitting clinical rotations, they know their way so well around an ultrasound machine that they're making some of the residents and attendings look like, they don't know which probe is which is a testament. And so, that is one aspect. I'll let Dr. Camby, but I'll plant the seed out there. SCIPS program, phenomenal program, but I'm just going to tease you with that name for right now. I think the other part, we've had a lot of new comms pop up. And so, I think sometimes you get dazzled by, oh, it's on the beach, or, they have this big name, or they have a lot of money. One of the concerns is, we've been around, 120 plus years. And so, and we continue to evolve and to produce excellent students and excellent healthcare providers. And so I think as you're looking at that, and whether it's our global health opportunities, whether it's our, anatomy simulation, standardized patient laboratories, whatever that might be, we're continuing to say, how can we do better? And I think that's important in any organization that's not comfortable to just sit back and say, well, we do a good, we're 97, we're 98% first time pass rate. Camby and I talk all the time, well, can we be 100? I mean, it's, and to me, good is the enemy of great. And so it's a matter of continuing to push and say, how can we be better? And not only that, but I would also lead, and I'll finish my part by saying, again, what I talked about earlier, mental health, well-being, resiliency. I mean, you can't open up a newspaper or turn on social media without seeing the crisis about mental health and even the mental health and well-being of medical students. In the past 6 months, there have been 4 medical students that have committed suicide. Fortunately, none at DMU, but we've recognized that this is a pervasive issue. And so we have things in place where we have a real talk, where students share challenges with their classmates, peer-to-peer counseling. We have a very active student counseling center that's very confidential, because we realize that looking at the surveys, and the center for the group, the Osteopathic Student Government, did a survey, 10,000 respondents, and there's a prevalence of depression of 38%. So, some schools choose to kind of turn the other way. We've embraced that to say this is real, and what can we do? So we're looking at things of saying, do we eventually go to a pass-fail curriculum? Not saying we're doing that, so be clear on that. But what we used to think was, well, if you go to pass-fail, everyone's going to underachieve, and places won't want you. The evidence bears the opposite. Students actually do better, and they're much more healthier in their mental health and well-being. So looking at those things, looking at more integration, so you're not leapfrogging from exam to exam. So you're not getting so stressed out and you're saying, oh, this all makes sense. So we're taking a very proactive approach at student well-being, wellness, and mental health, because it is important. And the bottom line is that if we don't produce healthy and students that have well-being, how can you help patients with their health and well-being?
And that's, the bottom line is that we really want to give our patients the very best. And we mentioned the ultrasound component. We brought ultrasound in because it's a great learning tool to help connect information and scaffold information and bring it into the anatomy space and into the physiology space, and you get to learn a whole new way. But in reality, the ultrasound is really going to help the patient, because when you're out in practice, particularly if you're in a rural area, if you're a subsistence farmer and you have to go to the doctor, it takes a long time to get there. You spend a day, you lose that opportunity at work. Then you have to get a prescription for a diagnostic test, and you lose another day, and then you have to come back to get the results. That's too much time. It's very expensive for the healthcare system. With an ultrasound process, if you've learned it all through your career, you know how to use it diagnostically, you can provide that care within 20 minutes or so, and you're able to give that patient exactly what they need. Plus, you're developing that relationship. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is give you the best opportunities to treat your patients the best that they can be cared for.
I've been here almost 25 years, so I'm kind of a walking dinosaur, not yet a fossil.
Historian,
But,
historian.
people call me a historian. Thank you. That's kinder and gentler. But what attracted me to DMU at the time was its focus on medical education. In 24 plus, almost to 25 years I've been here, I can genuinely say that the faculty here, the administrators here, have a love and a passion for education. Uh, they value their time that they have with students, and it's something that we can lift up and certainly say this makes us unique, and it's something that is truly cherished here. We can't rest on our laurels. We do have to be forward thinking. We have to innovate. We have to lead. If we're not leaders, we're followers. So uh, ultrasound was a great addition, putting us into a leadership position. SCIPS is a way to move folks from sitting in a classroom to actually collaborating. Students talking to one another, they're problem solving, they're working on patient cases, they're pulling together information in a very dynamic, rich environment, and they're talking amongst themselves, and as a faculty member, an administrator walking around and just eavesdropping on the conversations. This is far more activating with respect to student learning than what I can provide by just delivering and transmitting information in a lecture environment. So we want to make students clinical problem solvers very, very early on, and we want to do it in a collaborative environment. And students love these opportunities. They're excited about them. They rave about them, and we've been able to show, not maybe through a rigorous educational study, but we were able to demonstrate that the SCIPS activities make the information very, very sticky. So the more you involve people in their own learning, the more you increase their depth of mental processing through these collaborative opportunities, the greater the retention and the understanding of the information. If it's more passive in its form, in its delivery, then it's not as sticky. Students have to do a lot of extra work going over and reviewing that material to actually retain it to a level that will be useful later on to them. So it's experimenting and trying out these new novel and innovative approaches, and then once you see traction being gained in that degree of purchase, then you start to formally thread them into the curriculum. And SCIPS is now in year 2 in many of the courses, and it's now embedded in the medical cell and tissue biology course, a first semester year 1 course. So we start to introduce students to these enriching collaborative environments. That's exciting.
Spent a lot of time talking about how great DMU is.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I hope this was informative. We're excited that you're going to be a part of the DMU family. And before you know it, August will be here. So we're looking forward to seeing you all.